Welcome back to Indiana at the Voice of College Football for our 16th edition of Indiana Hoosiers Live. And we got some interesting stuff to talk about tonight as we start getting more and more into off-season mode for Indiana football. And the first big thing I really wanted to talk about is just Curt Cignetti's attitude, right? You talk about, Tom Allen, and yeah, he said that Indiana was going to compete for Big Ten championships, all that sorts of stuff when he got the job, national championships. But with Curt Cignetti, you see him going out there day one and saying, like, Purdue sucks, Ohio State, Michigan sucks. That epic speech that he had. Beat 2 of the 3, couldn't beat Ohio State, but it was still epic and just completely turned the vibes and the culture. That's what he said. He had to change the way people think about Indiana football. And with their performances past season, a lot of people have changed their tune on Indiana football after just basically an historic from beginning to present of Indiana football, the entire timeline, the history of Indiana football being as bad as it is, one of the worst programs of all time, arguably the worst Power 5 program of all time. And in 1 year, he's made Indiana football relevant. Now, can he keep Indiana football relevant? Now that's the next question. And here you go. You got Curt Cignetti the other day saying Indiana football is not satisfied after a historic season. He went to the Indiana basketball game against Maryland in Assembly Hall on Sunday and delivered an epic speech that fired up Indiana Hoosier fans. And it's just so smart on his part. He did this last year when he first got the job, fired up fans. Now he's doing it now. And whether that results in them having another great year or not, we won't know until next season starts. But it just shows you the type of person that he is. He's not satisfied. He is still hungry and out to prove to the college football world that Indiana football can continue to win. And he's getting the Hoosier fans on board. You got to remember, Indiana is a basketball school. Most of the fans like the basketball team. They didn't really care about the football team all that much, and you can't blame them. The football team was not any good. But you're seeing more and more fans, especially with Indiana basketball, really struggling. And we're going to get to that later on in the show. But with Indiana basketball struggling, you're seeing a lot of Hoosier fans, I wouldn't say switch their allegiance over to football, because you can like both. That's absolutely possible. A lot of people say, a certain school can only be a football school or a basketball school. You're seeing like Alabama. Alabama will always be a football school. I mean, there's just no way. Like, even if Alabama football went 0-12 for the next 40 years, with the history of Alabama football, it would be really difficult to not say it's a football school. You know what I mean? It's just a hypothetical, and Alabama's not going to go 0-12 for the next 40, 50 years, but it's just an example. You have to really, really be bad for a long time, and then the other sport become really good. So, yes, Alabama basketball has become really, really good. Nate Oates is incredible. Something Indiana fans wish they had, and a coach is just tenacity and being able to, have a team play fun basketball, up tempo, good defense. Even though that's something Nate Oates does struggle with a bit, is defense, but the offense is great anyway. They don't have that in Mike Woodson, but they do seem to have it in Curt Cignetti so far, so that's fantastic for Indiana football. But my point, with Indiana basketball struggling for so long, for the last 25 years, outside of Kelvin Sampson's brief stint and a couple years with Tom Crean, Indiana basketball fans are really annoyed. And now that Indiana football is competitive and actually fun to watch and is relevant now in the sport, you're seeing a lot of Indiana basketball fans become Indiana football fans. And I'm not saying that football is overpassing their love for basketball. I'm not saying that, but you're seeing a lot of people that would have never have given Indiana football a chance. They are looking forward to next season of Indiana football more than the rest of this basketball season. And I know a lot of it has to do with, again, Indiana basketball struggling, but that's massive. That shows you the shift that Curt Cignetti has done to Indiana fans in 1 year. 1 year, and it's absolutely crazy. It just goes to show you that you can be a fan of both. If Indiana basketball gets better and ever gets back to being nationally relevant, then I think Indiana could be like Alabama. Not to that standard of football, obviously, but you can be good at both. How many years has Michigan football and Michigan basketball both been good, or Michigan State basketball and Michigan State football? It is possible. A lot of programs can be good at both. And you're seeing more and more programs become good at both. Texas is getting better at both, even though they still can't really get over the hump in either. But And that's something Hoosier fans don't like hearing, getting over the hump. That is Mike Woodson's signature slogan. I keep bringing up Mike Woodson because, again, we're going to get to him later. But Curt Cignetti absolutely outshining Mike Woodson. And him going to the basketball games, I just think it is so smart, in my opinion, to go to the basketball games, do these epic speeches, and I don't want to say convert. It's not the right word, but just bring over Indiana basketball fans into the Indiana football fandom. Get them to like both sports. And if Indiana basketball continues to struggle, make football maybe their priority. You know, we're like, hey, I'm gonna go to only football games this year. I mean, yeah, you don't want that to happen to Indiana basketball. I do not want that to happen to Indiana basketball. But I think it's great that Indiana football is bringing over so many of the basketball fans. They're now actually starting to watch football. It's awesome to see. And it's just creating such a shift. And it's, even though I get sick of talking about money because it has ruined football, in my opinion, college football has definitely been ruined in a lot of ways. Not all the way, but in a lot of ways due to money and NIL and all this sorts of stuff. But you got to have money now to win. It's the name of the game. And because Indiana football was very good last year, it's generated a lot more money to Indiana athletics and the university. And that's only going to help in the long run if Indiana continues to be good in football. And I just love Curt Cignetti's just uber optimism, just continuing to not be satisfied, like it says right here, and want to continue to do even better next year if possible. And you love to see it. And how you keep getting better and keep winning and having success, you got to bring in good players. And yeah, people pan that he brought in so many James Madison guys. Well, it's guys he was already familiar with. The schedule was easy, whatever. But he had to do what he had to do. He had to bring in somebody. So he brought in a lot of guys from James Madison. But now he can't do that. So he's having to bring in guys from other programs. I really like this portal class. It's ranked pretty well. It's ranked better than the high school class, but I think overall it is a pretty solid class, even if it's not ranked in the top 20 to top 30. Yes, Indiana's going to have to recruit better in the future somehow and use more money that they get to maybe get a top 15 class if they want to really compete for it all for a national championship. But good sign, though, is that Indiana's really fighting on the recruiting trail. Right now, they are in the running for 2 Notre Dame offensive linemen. That speaks for itself. You don't even have to read the word starter. The fact that Indiana is trying to get 2 Notre Dame offensive linemen. When you think great offensive line programs, you think Wisconsin, you think Notre Dame, you think Michigan, even Ohio State. You think the Big Ten. Yeah, the SEC's got some programs that do recruit well on the offensive line. Alabama had some good years. Georgia had some good years. But traditionally, when you think great offensive line schools, you think the Big Ten or Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's got so many great offensive linemen from the NFL. Now, that does not necessarily mean that these 2 guys are elite. It could be why they're leaving. They did start for Notre Dame. There were some injuries to their offensive line, but I mean, they performed pretty well. Notre Dame did run the ball pretty well this year. But Indiana's also brought in an offensive lineman from Ohio State in the offseason. That was something that Indiana's basically never done before. They got Trey Wettig recently in the last offseason from Wisconsin. So, like, Indiana's doing a better job of beefing up their offensive line, for lack of a better term. They are just bringing in quality offensive linemen more so than they did in the Tom Allen era. And they're also developing them more than they did in the Tom Allen era. Darren Hiller was not a good offensive line coach. I talked about that at length. It was frustrating. It was nauseating because guess what? Tom Allen didn't like firing people. He didn't like firing his friends. It's understandable. It's commendable. But it got Tom Allen fired because Darren Hiller was not developing the offensive line. He recruited pretty well, I guess, but they didn't get any better. The players never got any better. And when you're playing teams where their players are getting better and you're not, you're going to lose. Well, now they have Bob Bostad from Wisconsin. And Tom Allen did make a good hire with him, but Cignetti kept him on board once Allen was fired. And the offensive line just continued to improve this past season, and they're continuing to bring in better players. And it does not mean they're going to get these guys, because I do know that Indiana, their roster is pretty full, but they can get a couple more players possibly, and they can still look in the spring as well, because the spring transfer portal is going to happen too. So that's definitely an option for Indiana. If they don't land these 2 guys, they can maybe pick up an offensive lineman in the spring. Maybe they'll lose a couple depth pieces. That's going to happen to a lot of programs. They're going to lose a few depth pieces in the spring once they kind of realize, hey, I'm at the way back of the depth chart. No chance I'm going to play, so I'm going to transfer, go to a school where I'm going to get some playing time. But you see right there, Rocco Spindler was already on campus for Indiana, and Pat Coogan is going to be visiting on Friday, and both were starting offensive line for Notre Dame. This would massively upgrade Indiana's offensive line. I cannot stress that enough. And both of these guys are being recruited by Michigan. Both of them. And there's a shot Michigan gets one, Indiana gets the other. That right there I would take that. I would take that in a heartbeat. Yeah, Michigan gets one, but you get the other. You're splitting it even 50-50. I think Nebraska's in the running for one of these guys, so that would be a lose-lose if Michigan gets one of them, and then on the other token, Nebraska gets the other one. That would be bad. That could happen. I hope it doesn't happen. As long as Indiana, I feel like, lands one of these guys, because I feel like Indiana, I've looked at their roster, for next season, projected roster. They have a lot of offensive linemen, but they don't have as much experience as they had last year. That's what happens when you lose starters like Mike Kadick and Trey Wettig. And maybe Drew Evans as well. Nick Kidwell, he's on the fence, I think, whether he's going to come back or not. I think if Indiana lands one of these guys, it's more likely than not that they don't get Nick Kidwell back. Maybe he will. I think he might have another year left with injuries and stuff where he could come back, but still he was supposed to be a starter, transferred from James Madison this past season, but he got hurt before the season even began, didn't play, so could get a medical red shirt. But regardless, Indiana's O-line would be so beefed up if they can land both of these guys. But even one guy, a starting level offensive lineman from Notre Dame, would be one of the biggest pickups in Indiana history. I know Indiana's landed splashier players in the past. Getting Michael Penix was huge. Deshaun McCullough was big before he ended up leaving. But these guys, even one of these guys, would just show the shift in Indiana. That, hey, we're in competition with the best programs in college football for starting level offensive linemen from winning programs like Notre Dame. Like Ohio State. They got a backup from Ohio State, but you know what I'm saying? It would just show the shift. You've already seen a big shift in recruiting for Indiana, but I feel like landing one of these guys would further cement it. It would be a massive win for Curt Cignetti and Indiana football for next season. And I definitely hope that they are able to land at least one, because it definitely would be a game changer for Indiana football. The offensive line was a lot better this past season, but you got to get it even better. I still felt like that was probably the weakest link of Indiana's offense this past year. Wide receiver room was great. Running back room was great. Tight ends, they blocked well. Not great in the pass game, but, you don't have to have that if your receivers are really good. Quarterback with Rourke, even though he was hurt, really, really good. Offensive line, way improved. Still can get a lot better, and this could definitely be a step in the right direction. Hopefully Indiana gets one of those guys. But definitely, before we wrap up Indiana Hoosiers Live 16, I got to talk about Indiana basketball just for a minute. I know this is a football show, and we do, predominantly talk football at Indiana, at the voice of college football and the voice of college football community in general. But I got to talk about Indiana basketball for a minute. I did a segment last week saying, when will Mike Woodson get fired? And I said at the end of the season. I think he's going to be done at the end of the season. And a lot of people want him gone earlier. And I would agree with that, because I still think Indiana has a shot to turn their season around if they did make a change. But it's not going to happen. With him being, a Bob Knight, a player, an Indiana alumni, a basketball player, Mike Woodson is not going to get fired in the middle of the season. It's not going to happen. The unfortunate thing is this season's about to go off the rails. It's about to go off the rails. They got so many tough opponents coming up. Michigan State, Purdue twice, Michigan, UCLA. It's going to get ugly. They could lose their next 5 or 6 games. They had 2 winnable games, last couple games. They had Northwestern on the road. Were winning for the vast majority of that game, and they fell apart. Yeah, there were some bad calls in that game, but Indiana blew it. They fell apart. But this game right here, this game with Curt Cignetti in the house, I can't stress that enough. Just showing the culture shift, getting the Hoosier fans on board with football, like, be fired up for next season. We're not satisfied. We're going to try to do even better, whether they do or not. Just the bold words, and it makes me believe. It makes me believe they're going to be really good next year, even if they don't make the playoffs. Still have a great season. 8-4-9-3 would be fantastic. Then you go on the other side of the token, and you look at Mike Woodson, and you look at this game, and you're like, you know what? A 1-point loss at home to a really competent Maryland team. Is that bad? Especially when Indiana was an underdog. Is that really bad? You would say no, but when you really look at the context of this game and how it played out, and if you watch this game, which if you're an Indiana fan, you did. If you're not, you didn't. Or if you're not a basketball fan, you didn't. But the end of this game was just horrible. Indiana had this game. it was over. Like they were up 4. It was like 50 seconds left in the game. Indiana gives up a quick score. Doesn't foul. That's fine. Indiana's up 2. All they have to do is hit free throws, and they're out of there. They win the game. And what does Mike Woodson not do? He does not put in his 2 best free throw shooters, and Mackenzie Mbako and Luke Goody, into the game. He has them on the bench. Doesn't bring them in. Miles Rice is in the game, but he's bringing the ball up the floor. Maryland doesn't foul him because they know he's a good free throw shooter. If you had Mbako or Goody out there, Rice could have passed it to one of them. They fouled him, knocked down both free throws. You win the game, right? But no. Passes it to Trey Galloway, one of the worst free throw shooters on the team. Galloway misses the free throw. And you're like, all right, whatever. Then Maryland hits a 3. 8 seconds left. Maryland's up by 1. Then Miles Rice is bringing the ball up the floor with a full head of steam with like 5 seconds left. You don't know what could happen. He could go all the way down the floor, lay it in. He could get fouled, whatever. Mike Woodson calls timeout to draw up a play. And then you're like, well, I mean, I guess that's smart. Draw up a good play. Try to hit the game-winning shot. If you miss, you lose, whatever. Well, when the game starts again, Mike Woodson takes, and the ball, mind you, is under the goal, like they're inbounding behind the basketball goal. So that's lob territory, right? Well, he takes Umar Ballo out of the game. He takes the 7-footer out of the game, and he brings in Luke Goody and Mackenzie Mbako. Both of those players should have been in the game when they needed a free throw, but instead he brings them in with 3 seconds left, and he draws up nothing. Miles Rice just takes a fadeaway jump shot in the corner, misses. Indiana loses the game. All the while, Hoosier fans are just booing at the incompetency of that whole sequence. And yeah, this game was officiated horribly, but it doesn't change the fact that Indiana just cannot win. Just cannot win games that matter. You look at the record and you say they're 14-7. It's still not that bad. They're 5-5 in the league. They could turn it around. They've lost to some teams they should have beaten, and they've only beaten the worst teams in the Big Ten. It's going to get so much worse. They're about to become like 14-12 and 5-10 in the league. The way they're playing right now, I don't see them winning any of their next 5 games. If they start playing better, maybe they will. But if you're telling me in his 4th season with all this talent, all the millions of dollars that was spent toward Indiana basketball to make this team good, that Indiana is 14-12 and 5-10 in the league, and they were preseason favorites to win the Big Ten in Woodson's 4th season, Mike Woodson's done. There's no way. And if he's not fired, it is because of probably the fact that he is, an alumni and former player under Bob Knight, and that's why he was hired. Look at Quinn Buckner. A lot of people are blaming him, saying, well, he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to, fire Woodson because he just want to hire him. Well, technically, Scott Dolson's the one that hired him, but I don't really know how much of an influence Quinn Buckner had. If he had a lot of an influence on it, then he needs to step back and let Scott Dolson do his job and fire him. Because I will say this, Scott Dolson never does this like he did in this game. He was right behind Mike Woodson. He literally was sitting right behind Mike Woodson. He saw that blunder at the end. That is a bad look. It's different to lose this game. And yeah, Indiana played decently well in this game. One of their better games of the season, which is not saying much, but played pretty well. But it was how they lost. That was all on Mike Woodson. And I hate it because I don't want Mike Woodson to get fired if he was good. If Mike Woodson was a fantastic coach, I got nothing against him. I don't have anything against him personally. I don't know him. I don't know any coach personally. But judging off his coaching skills from what I can observe with his rotations, with who he recruits, the roster construction, his timeout usage, his play calling, it's bad. It's all bad. It's terrible. And he does not ever get the most out of the players he has, unless the player is a star like Trace Jackson Davis, who was an Archie Miller player, and Khalil Ware, who he got in the portal. Yes, Ware got better. But other than that, who has improved? I mean, yeah, Renew's gotten better over 3 years, but Renew's still not an elite player. And then you look at the guards. Woodson's guards, oh, man. Galloway's regressed. I know he's had injuries, but he's regressed. Miles Rice is capable way more than what he's doing right now, but Woodson won't get anything out of him. Kanan Carlisle's just non-existent. He was almost Pac-12 Freshman of the Year last year. Miles Rice was Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Both underperforming. You look at Xavier Johnson, got worse over his tenure at Indiana. Injuries didn't help, but still. You just look all across the board. Mike Woodson does not make the vast majority of his players better. It's maybe one guy. And when I look at this year's team, who's gotten better? Ballo? Maybe? I don't know. But again, that's the center. It's always the center. He can make centers better, but he can't make guards better. He can't make wings better. Luke Goody's played well, but that's only because he's an established shooter from another team. And he has a little bit more mobility than Miller Kopp, so he can kind of run around a little bit and take ridiculous shots as Mike Woodson won't set open for threes. It's just painful. It's terrible. I don't know. All I know is that even if somehow Indiana basketball makes the tournament, Mike Woodson has to get fired. It's just this program's going nowhere. And I know Indiana's fired a lot of coaches. You got to get it right this time. Get Chris Beard. Throw the Brink truck at Bruce Pearl. Make him come over. It probably won't happen at this point because he's getting older and he's been at Auburn for a long time and they're committing to basketball way more than they ever have before. But I'm just saying, I mean, you got to do something. You can't keep being mediocre, or if you do, then Indiana basketball is just going to be perpetually mid forever. They're just not going. They're never going to get back to blue blood status. They're just always going to be average. The Indiana fans don't want that. I mean, they've literally are becoming apathetic. Yeah, they show up to games a lot, especially bigger games, but they already know they're going to lose most of them. It's just not a good feeling. It's very unhealthy. Curt Cignetti's been very good for Indiana University, but what would make it even better for Indiana University if they had a good basketball coach? The program that was the foundation for this university's athletics. I want Indiana football to take over because, yes, that's where the money's coming from. That's where everything is being geared towards to have a successful athletics department is for your football team to be really good. But I don't want Indiana basketball to get left behind. It's been bad for way too long. Mike Woodson's not keeping his promises of hanging banners at Indiana. They need a new coach. And I just feel like if they're mid for too much longer, Indiana's going to lose their ability to even attract a good candidate. I mean, they really didn't when they got Archie, and they really didn't with Mike Woodson. It felt like they got Mike Woodson because no one else really wanted the job. But the thing is, you got to make them want the job. Curt Cignetti came over because Indiana paid him and said, we're going to commit to football. Well, if you're Indiana basketball, instead of paying $5, $6, $7 million to get these players that you have right now that aren't doing anything with this coach, pay $9 or $10 million to get one of the top college basketball coaches, and then let's win. You don't even have to have the top players. You just got to have the coach, and he'll figure it out. I mean, Nate Oates is Mark Sears from Ohio. Bruce Pearl gets tons of dudes from the mid-major level. You don't need 5 stars like Bill Self or John Shire. You just need a great coach that is going to get the most out of the players he has. Mike Woodson is not doing that with way more talented players, and it just isn't changing. And this game was just pitiful. Absolutely pitiful. To me, it was the final nail in the coffin. The Louisville game was to me. But this, if anybody was still on the fence, this is the game. Because Indiana basketball is just going to keep on losing from here on out. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel at the end of the season. It's just going to get worse. If I'm wrong and they turn it around, I'll be happy. I want Indiana to win. I'm not going to be one of those people that are like, oh, I want them to lose. Like some people are. I want Indiana to lose so they'll fire Woodson. I still would rather them win. I'd rather Woody figure it out, but he's not. So I'm just like, he needs to get fired, but I still want them to win. But it is what it is. We'll just have to see what happens the rest of the season. But things are definitely not looking great for Indiana basketball. Indiana football's on the upswing. We got that going. Hopefully Curt Cignetti has a fantastic offseason. Indiana football will have just as good, if not better, of a year next year if possible. Even if it's worse, just hopefully they have a pretty solid year, 7-5, 8-4. Definitely will be satisfied with that, just considering Indiana's history. But hopefully Indiana football can keep trucking, and hopefully Indiana basketball can get better in the future. But we'll be here to continue to cover it week by week, talking about Hoosier football, any new updates that happen with that, and I guess give them some weekly updates on Indiana basketball because it is looking pretty bleak right now. If they have any shot to make the tournament, I definitely will talk about the brackets and stuff like that as it gets close. But right now, Indiana's on the outside looking in. Definitely not looking good. But thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. Appreciate you guys always for being in the chat. I'll definitely read your comments before we get out of here. Jackson said, what's up, Hoosier Nation? Appreciate that. 214 days of the start of the 2025 Indiana football season. I cannot wait, Jackson. I cannot wait. I cannot believe it's only 214 days already. It seems like a long time, but it will come quicker than we know it. Also, Mark Rogers' book, definitely the links right here. If you are a college football fan, especially a fan of the 1990s, Mark Rogers' book, Disputed National Champions, College Football's Historical 1990s Reset. Definitely go to Amazon and check it out. It's definitely worth it. 5-star reviews all across the board. Stephen Cherry says, my God, Jeffrey, salute. Appreciate that, Stephen. Jackson says, check out my YouTube channel, Only Talk Sports. Definitely. Me and Will do shows. A lot of content going to be coming eventually on my YouTube channel. Definitely check out Only Talk Sports, college football, basketball, NFL, NBA, and my X account as well. Twitter's crazy, we know, but I still try to mend through the craziness and offer my takes every now and then. So definitely appreciate if you give me a follow over there. Jeff says, I'm here tonight. Appreciate that, Jeff. Always glad to see you. Jackson says, let's help Jeffrey get Indiana, the voice of college football, 1,000 subs and Only Talk Sports 3,000. That's the goal, Jackson. That and beyond. Trying to get the Bama channel with you up to 3,000 as well. Definitely go check out that channel too. Jojo Beowulf says, good job, Jeffrey. Appreciate that. Appreciate you for being here. Stephen Cherry says, Cignetti's only L's with Notre Dame and Ohio State, arguably best turnaround in college football history. I mean, it's unbelievable. 3-9, absolutely in the gutter, and then 11-2, and your 2 losses are to the national championship teams in the national championship game. Unreal, absolutely crazy. What a job he did. The Godfather of the SEC, appreciate you for being here. Says hello, Jeffrey, and also to Jackson as well. Appreciate you for stopping by. Stephen Cherry says Bobby Knight rolling over in his grave, which is ironic because he said to bury him upside down. Says Curt kiss his butt. Yeah, I love that comment. I know people didn't like him, but man, he had some iconic lines. He has some iconic lines, and a lot of his players did respect him as well, especially Isaiah Thomas. Definitely, when you look at human beings being flawed, Bobby Knight was a flawed person. He had a lot of good in him. Some bad as well, but he had a lot of good in him. Definitely a very controversial figure, but a fantastic coach. And yes, he is, because Indiana basketball has been horrible since he's been gone. Jodo says, hey, Jeffrey, I had those sheets of little kids behind you with the NFL team. Hey, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I got like the states behind me. It's pretty cool on that. Definitely glad you noticed that, and that's awesome. Godfather of the SEC says, I'm good. How about yourself? Talking to Jackson, I'm sure, but definitely I hope all you guys are doing great tonight. I'm doing pretty good. Just excited talking about Indiana football. It's, again, historic season. We'll be talking about for a long time, even in the years to come. Just want Indiana basketball to get there. Jeff says Coach Cignetti is a winner. He will get some players to keep his winning going. I agree. Definitely hope so. Rest for helping Maryland in that game. You should have won. I agree. I really do. But, man, that was still a terrible ending. Jackson says Indiana basketball is unfortunately mid. Stole it right out of my mouth, Jackson. Absolutely, and it's unfortunate. Troika, appreciate you being here. QBs and I trust you to on the scale during Woody's hire. Yeah, I mean, that Woody shouldn't have been hired. I mean, he was not a really great NBA coach. He had his moments at the Hawks and the Knicks, but still. Jodo says Indiana basketball has to go 5-5 at worst to finish out and then hopefully win a few in the Big Ten tournament, 19-12. Yeah, if they go 5-5 the rest of the way, I mean, they can still get in the tournament, but even making the tournament's not good enough to really save Woody, in my opinion, especially considering they were the favorites to win the Big Ten. That's vastly underperforming still. Problem is, when you look at the rest of the schedule, I don't see 5 wins. This was one of them. The Northwestern game was one of them. They didn't win either. Yeah, they got Washington left. They got Penn State, Ohio State. It's 3. Maybe UCLA, but I only see maybe 4 at most. I don't see many more wins. They're going to have to upset somebody big. We'll see. Steven says, give Dan Hurley a blank check. Yeah, Dan Hurley's a pain to a lot of people with his antics, but yeah, if he got the job, it'd be a slam dunk hire. But if he didn't go to Kentucky, he's not going to Indiana. He's staying at UConn. Jeff says Woodson's on the chopping block. He won't be there much longer. Yeah, it's definitely not much time left for Woody at all. Steven says, go get Billy Donovan from the Chicago Bulls or Brad Stevens from the Celtics. I mean, Brad Stevens would be the wish, but it's not happening. He's got one of the coziest jobs in the world. I'm sure there's some hard stuff to it, but man, I mean, his job cannot be that difficult. Danny Ainge set him up perfectly for that. If I was him, I'd stay in that job. Definitely. Godfather says, great show. Appreciate that, Godfather. Always love seeing you in the chat, whether it's here or on the Bama channel. Appreciate it. Jojo says, what's your win-loss prediction for Indiana for 2025? I would probably go 8-4 for now. Maybe 9-3. I would say 8-4 to be safe because they do have at Oregon, at Penn State, at Iowa, some tough home games. 8-4, 9-3. I'm on the fence between those two. I could see him doing better, though, because what Cignetti's done so far. But the schedule is tougher this next season versus last year. It's going to be interesting to see with less James Madison players how he does, too. So I would say 8-4 for now, but that could definitely change. Definitely change. Jackson says, Alabama, voice of college football. Definitely check it out. Go subscribe over there as well. Appreciate that, Jackson. Joe says, Jeffrey, what was your top 5 moments in the football season this year? Well, that's tough. There's a lot of great moments. I mean, if you're just talking Indiana, that Nebraska game was probably number 1. That's such an anticipated game. Indiana at home. A lot of people didn't think they'd win, and then they just blew them out 56-7. That was incredible. Honestly incredible. Beat Michigan was huge too. But, I mean, when you're looking at, the bigger picture, I mean, Alabama beating Georgia at the time, because I'm a Bama fan too, that was awesome. That was incredible. But then the rest of the season for Bama wasn't that good. I mean, in the playoffs, that Arizona State-Texas game was fantastic. I mean, there was a lot of great moments. There was a lot of great games. But, I mean, to me, Indiana being as good of a team as they were when no one was expecting it, that was the top moment. That was number one for sure. Everything else follows it. Like Ohio State winning the title, it's great for Ohio State fans. But like the fact Indiana made the playoffs, 12-team playoff, but the playoffs when they were expected to go 4-8, that was the top story. And Arizona State was a great story too. And there were other good teams as well. I mean, Deion, they beefed Deion up. Yeah, he did well, but I don't think it was anywhere close to a top story. But still had a good year. But those are just some of my, takes on some of the best moments of the football season. It's hard to really say which was the best, legitimately, because bias from, other fan bases is going to determine that, but that would be from my perspective. And then Jackson says Indiana has to do what NC State did last year for Woodson to stay. I don't know. I don't really see any way, Woodson can stay. I mean, he's just underperforms every single year with too much talent, and you just can't do that at any program, let alone Indiana. It's been too long. The fans are tired of it. That's why Indiana football is so refreshing. Hoosier fans needed something good, and Curt Cignetti has given it to them. And hopefully that continues. But appreciate everybody for being here. Thanks for stopping by. Indiana Hoosiers Live 16 will be back next week for another show Tuesday night. Definitely talk more Hoosier football, more news that comes down the pipe. Maybe a transfer portal edition with one of those offensive linemen would be great. Maybe some more Cignetti sound bites, but definitely can't wait for that. We'll also, have more off-season content, just talking about like things Indiana can do better, maybe as a university to improve football as well. And keep talking about Indiana basketball. It's pretty rough right now. But thanks everybody for being here. Like the stream down below, comment down below, share it on social media, let other people know what we're doing here every Tuesday night, especially Hoosier fans, but any college football fan for that matter. And definitely always appreciate you guys for stopping by Indiana at the voice of college football. And go Hoosiers, everybody. Hopefully Indiana definitely can keep doing great in college football and get better in college basketball. Definitely would be nice. Thanks for being here, everybody.